I'm Lisa Olivieri, and I am the director-producer of the documentary film Recovery City, which is about 4 women in recovery in Worcester, Massachusetts. And we are here at Windsor High School to have a screening and kind of raise awareness about what recovery looks like, and to also raise awareness about stigma and how stigma can be harmful to people who are trying to recover.
Truth or dare?
Truth or dare?
Mm-hmm.
I'm no good at truth or dare. Okay. Truth. Every time.
Listen, I'm tired of living like this. I'm tired.
This is our situation.
People say that I'm making a lot of progress, but I'm just not quite there yet.
What is wrong with me? 8 years ago, that was my question. It wasn't a drug, it wasn't my criminal behaviors. There was something deeper inside of me that had to be addressed.
Can I get a hug? I love you. I love you so much. A lot of it is just stigma. People look at that pattern in my history and think, oh, she's never gonna change.
Together we are stronger. Recovery is possible.
Together we are stronger.
And in City Hall, in that bathroom, that's the last place that I got high. And I've been in recovery ever since.
I found myself fighting for my children through recovery.
I couldn't change for my kids. You know, I checked into detox 150 times. And all we can do is like keep trying. That's it.
I love you so very much, Emma, and know that like all day, every day, I'm fighting for you as hard as I possibly can, and I'm never giving up. Never.
But that was an emotional roller coaster. What an incredibly powerful film. Inspirational, devastating, hopeful, incredibly moving and incredibly powerful. And I think a lot of us in the field, that's why we do what we do, is so that some of those stories can come to life. And because sometimes we lose people who don't make it and are determined to help others. It's an honor to be here, and in a moment I'll ask the panelists to introduce themselves. Just privileged to be a part of this, and want to thank the team from the Dartmouth Hitchcock Health Center for Advancing Rural Health Equity, and Katie Keating and Angie and everyone there for supporting the recovery work and the Windsor community, and just everyone for attending this tonight. So I'd love to just start out with each of you introducing yourselves and maybe share like how you're feeling right now, and sort of what, after watching this film, what are your sort of initial thoughts?
I'll start. My name's Caitlin, and I'm a resident. Well, I grew up in Windsor. I live in Hartland, but I consider myself a resident of Windsor. And I'm in recovery. And I've worked as a recovery coach, and I've seen people in recovery, and I've seen people struggle and not make it to recovery. And this film really touched home for me because I also had to fight for custody of my daughter from her father, who overdosed, and my daughter was left alone. But I didn't have DCF. I had to fight for custody from his sister. And the other thing I want to say is the importance of having the community and recovery coaches embedded in the police station, all helping and supporting these people so they don't feel isolated and they feel connected. Because connection is the opposite of addiction, and addiction leads to isolation.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Susie Walker. I'm the director of Recovery Partners of Vermont, and I'm a woman in long-term recovery. And this film was so moving and impactful. And a couple of things occurred to me. One, in the work that we do sometimes, I hear people refer to the vulnerable population that we serve. And I think that's just such an inaccurate way to describe people who are so resilient, who are in such punishing situations, and then suffer more punishment through the system that's there ostensibly to support them. And so I'm grateful that in the recovery community that we truly meet people where they are. And we provide the support that they're asking for, and we make the connections, and we provide the love and the encouragement to let people be who they are and not impose our ideas on them. And I'm grateful that the recovery community is so connected with emergency department programs and police departments and schools, and that our communities are much more aware of substance use issues and the impact of stigma. There's a lot of work to do still, and yet there's hope. And we're reminded with stories like these that there is hope, that people do recover. And sometimes people just discount people who are struggling with substances and mental health disorders because they just think it's over for them, and they just have no idea that for me it's been 26 years, and that's another person, and I could never have imagined what my life could be like, and I'm profoundly grateful.
I'm Lisa Olivieri, the director and producer of Recovery City, and thank you for having us here. It's an honor to be here. I'm going to pass this to Rebecca.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Zwicker, and I am a mom and a grandmother, or Mimi, in long-term recovery. And I'm one of the subjects in this documentary with Lisa. What else would you like to know?
That's a great start. I'll ask you some more questions here in a few.
Obviously, open book.
Well, we've got a lot of questions for you, Rebecca, and just want to say thank you for your courage and your inspiration. Congratulations on everything that you've achieved, for being, and just for being here to share your example with us. Lisa, I'm going to start with you. What inspired you to tell this story, and what was your main goal? And I'll go on to the next one, which was, what was the most transformative experience for you personally while making the film?
I might have to ask you the second question again, because I'm not good at the multiple questions. So I wanted to make the film because I was, hearing about the opioid crisis a few years ago. It was fentanyl and opioids, and it was in the news a lot, and I wanted to do something with that, and also do something with someone who is trying to get something back. So that brings Christine in, and when I heard her story, I was, sort of blown away at how long the kids were gone. And then the more I found Christine first, and the more I started kind of just, talking to people around Worcester. I don't live in Worcester. I live about 40 miles away, so I didn't really know anybody there. And then people would say, oh, you have to talk to Rebecca. Rebecca is so, steeped in the recovery community, and she's out on the streets, and she's doing all this good work. So I met Rebecca, and she came with Janice, so it became like a Cagney and Lacey situation. And then I met Bridget at Everyday Miracles because I was waiting for her boss, and he forgot about our meeting, and Bridget graciously said, you know, do you want to sit in and listen to the women's space meeting? And I said, yeah, sure, why not? And I was really blown away at like the support that everybody gave each other, because I'm not in recovery. And people sharing really painful stories that, I mean, you can always say what you're gonna do, but you don't really know. I don't know if that I could tell those stories over and over again. I just don't know. But again, you don't know till you know, like Bridget says. But I was very impressed with the amount of support there was there for people in recovery, and I wanted to challenge myself and tell like 4 overlapping stories, and I just had no idea I was going to do that, but it worked. And I just I learned a lot about recovery. So the transformative part, I think that was your next question, was I really didn't, you know, I made the film with the hopes that it would get into festivals and it would have an impact campaign, but I had no idea we would be screening for, now it's 13 months. Like a few screenings a month sometimes. I had no idea that it would be like nationwide or international or anything like that. So, you know, that's been sort of blowing my mind to see. But yeah, that's how it got started. And, you know, the other transformative thing, if I can just say for me, was just learning more about recovery and meeting people where they're at, because, you know, obviously I know people who have struggled with addiction and I know people who have overdosed, but I really didn't know a lot about how to recover. So the meeting people where they're at, you know, that's been, I am a teacher full-time, and that's been something that I bring into my teaching, because sometimes kids are just, you know, not feeling it, or they're not feeling me, and I'm really not feeling them, but I still have to teach and try to get them to have a good day. So I take that in with me when I work.
I was really amazed by how authentic and natural the film felt. Like everyone felt so comfortable with you and so open, and sort of, nobody was acting. It was just life. And I don't know, that struck me. Like, so I would feel self-conscious in front of a camera, and everybody just felt so comfortable and so sort of just with each other in the room, as if you weren't there almost. So that just really struck me. So,
well, thank you.
Really a remarkable quality. Rebecca, what inspired you to get involved in this film and share your personal journey so openly?
I would say that I was already vocal about my recovery, and I had a very negative experience. I just celebrated 11 years on June 19th. And I am someone who couldn't get 11 days, never mind 11 years. And I kept trying, but I had a very negative experience. I overdosed on the train, June 15th of 2014. And I came to in the ICU. I didn't know where I was. And I remember I opened up my eyes, and the hospital light, you know, the big light, is above me, and the light's off. And I looked down at my arm, and the IV was in my arm, but not in my vein. So the fluid was just going in my skin. So my arm was like 15 times the size of my regular arm. And then I went to take a deep breath, and I couldn't really breathe. And the doctor and nurse had came over, and I had a Johnny top on, and it was summer, and I had little black shorts. And she said, Rebecca, you're lucky to be alive. You overdosed on the train. You died. You were revived. People on the train tried to do CPR. You have 8 broken ribs. I'm not giving you any pain medication, and you're medically cleared for discharge. And I wanted help at that moment. It had been two and a half days that I was in a coma. And anyone that has an opiate addiction or had knows that it's like the flu times 1,000. That's how you feel. So I had one thing, you know, there was no way I was asking someone. It was discrimination. If I was there for diabetes or for, you know, a cardiac arrest, if I was there or a car accident, if I was there for some other reason, there would be some dignity there. Come to find out, when I overdosed, I peed my pants because I died, and I was still in the same shorts 2.5 days later. So when I came into recovery, not knowing I was going to, the last time I used was June 18th, and my pathway into recovery was incarceration, which I do not promote that. However, my addiction had progressed, and it just brought me to a place where I was at animalistic level, where all I knew was just to get high, and I didn't want to anymore. So I turned that negative and turned it into a positive, and then I got involved at Everyday Miracles, became a member, and a product of a peer recovery center, and then they sent me to the Recovery Coach Academy, and then I became a director of another recovery center and opened that, and then I started my nonprofit with the Worcester Police and doing the post-overdose program. So like I took my negative experiences. One facility I checked into 69 times. And the reason why I went back to that one facility 69 times, because they treated me good. The other ones that was like, Rebecca, why are you back here again? It was like, I'm not going to come back there because that was your plan. You didn't ask me what would work for me. So, and then I end up becoming a recovery coach and meeting with individuals in that same ER and ICU that I was in. And that's how recovery works. It's full circle. Long answer, but.
Perfect. So this is both for Caitlin and Rebecca, although I think this is actually pretty relevant to all of us. What helped you along your journey toward recovery, and what role has community and peer support or mutual support played in your continued recovery and resilience?
I would say having others in the community that have a similar pathway to recovery, not just those who have a similar pathway, but others in recovery who support me, listen to me, validate me, and encourage me and celebrate my recovery is what's helped me along the way.
You want to answer?
Oh, I thought you said.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Anyone can answer. Go
Okay,
ahead, Susie.
sorry.
No, you're good.
Let's see, the question. Oh, well, one of the beautiful things to me about recovery is that in being connected with other people in an authentic way, where I'm accepted, where I get to explore and learn things and make mistakes and learn them a new way, I learned to become who I was always, I think, destined to be when I got everything else out of the way. And I learned that because I had examples of people who shared my experience and who were mirrors to me, that I could see myself through them and I could have hope through them. And so it's a privilege to get to now be in that work and get to see that happen for other people. So I'm very, very grateful. Thanks.
I would double with both of you. And you know, that TED Talk, the opposite of addiction is connection, and just trying to find that connection. I happen to come into recovery in the same community that I actively used. And for me, it was like giving back to my community really is in my heart and still is today. It's a gift to be able to wake up and have a choice when you see so many others that don't. And then, you know, like Blanca, I still get very emotional because we worked a lot with Blanca, supporting her. And I have to make sure that I keep the hope alive and, you know, empower the ones that are living in recovery today or attempting to come into recovery. I'm grateful every day.
So in a couple minutes, we're going to turn to, you know, the role of recovery community organizations and some of the solutions. And we saw some really powerful examples in Everyday Miracles and so many others. You know, in some ways, part of the reason we're here together today is the effort to deepen the peer community here in Windsor and Windsor County, and sort of continue to bring more resources to rural Vermont in between the connective nodes of the recovery centers and all of the different types of recovery community organizations. I'm not sure trying to think of how to ask this question, but I'll tell you sort of the impetus behind it is, you know, in my previous role, I was the executive director of an organization that served all women with significant trauma backgrounds and sexual and domestic violence, incarceration, you know, and you know, a residential program, workforce program. And I used to go to the, you know, the correctional facilities, and every time I went, I saw the common thread in more than 90% of the people that were being incarcerated for substance use disorders and concomitant, you know, crimes or other things that happened. And so it's hard to ignore, and this film illustrates the role of gender-based violence. And well, let me just ask you a kind of an open-ended question, and just kind of like, how do you feel that and you saw the inequities in the system and the challenges in the system that related to DCF and treatment of women in terms of their roles as mothers and all of these things. So gender plays a huge role, and how do you feel that working on trauma and guilt and shame and body image and all of the things that are wrapped up in this and violence contributes to recovery outcomes, and how can our system and men be better allies in terms of uplifting women's recovery? It is a big question. I'm sorry.
I don't know if it was directed to somebody in particular.
Really?
I don't know. I have a little bit of an, I mean, that's a big question. I have a little bit of an answer. There are a lot of inequities between men and women. And I'm glad you said gender-based violence, because I've not heard anybody at a screening use that term, but it is gender-based violence and gender-based discrimination. Especially when Christine goes through when, you know, she shows up, or her social worker shows up and says, are you feeling okay? Because she didn't have makeup on, which is code for, are you using again, right? And there was a lot of that directed at her. How can we make men be better allies is a good question. One thing I think, it's such a big topic, and there's so many, everybody has different experiences, but speaking for Christine, using her words that she's used, you know, maybe if somebody had believed her when she was younger, that would have been a start. And maybe that wouldn't have kicked off what kicked off for her, right? Maybe if that could have been nipped in the bud, not that there wouldn't have been trauma, but having support, you know, people recover when they're supported. Things like that. I know there's lots of times when people say they don't believe certain things happen, sexual assaults and rapes and all domestic violence. I can also say, I don't know if it's here and if you guys have the same law, but so in Massachusetts and with domestic violence, if you call on your partner and you have kids home, they will take the kids. Is that right? Most of the times? Lots of times. They have to take the kids to protect them.
Both parties.
Yep, and sometimes both parties are arrested, but the solution isn't taking the kids from their mother. The solution is getting the guy away from the woman, which, you know, we know restraining orders don't really do anything. But I don't know how to solve that. Like, I remember when I was sort of just reaching out to different people in Worcester starting this film, and a woman told me that, you know, because I would just talk to different people. Even if I was filming, they would come up and start telling me stories, or they would Facebook message me and tell me stories, and they were lots of the same story. But there was a woman in Worcester, which I'm sure happens everywhere, and she called the police on her boyfriend or partner or whatever. Her kids weren't even home, and she couldn't, when they came home, I don't know if they were asleep over, they were somewhere, but they were taken, and it took her a year to get them back. So this punishment of women, you know, sometimes you just pick the wrong guy, right? Like, I've picked the wrong guy. Everybody's picked the wrong somebody once in a while, but it seems like that's a lifelong punishment for women. And I'm not sure how to solve that, unless, I mean, the broad statement is raise better men, but I mean, that's right. Like, it's like, well, how do you solve poverty? Print more money? I mean, it's very not very intelligent thing to say. Or, you know, more work needs to be done. But you can say more, I think, if you want.
This is,
It's a big.
yeah, it's a multi-layered question for sure. My significant other, he just celebrated 30 years, and he has raised his son since he was 2 months old. Picked him up from the hospital. Mom was active during pregnancy. He did not know, and now I have a bonus son who's 14. So it happens, you know, to the positive too. I do believe that my own experience at previous, so this time in recovery, I stayed single for a long time, and I had to do some work on myself and make better, healthy decisions for me. So I'm not gonna say it was the guy's fault, it was the guy's fault. Part of it was my fault too, in codependency, in low self-esteem. So, you know, maybe I didn't have the best picking eyes, you know, or the red flags and, you know, avoiding the red flags. So I don't want to just say that like all men are bad,
You know, I don't want to like make it that way. I know in Mass, we always have less women beds. One treatment facility, I'm not going to mention the name, it's a long-term residential program, has 120 beds. 97 are men, 23 are women. Why? Why is that? You know, because moms can't go to detox because they have to be the caretaker to the child, but dad can go multiple times. I know 6, but part of formerly Christine, you know, she was told by her DCF worker that she couldn't go to detox, you know, because she would lose her apartment. What, for alcohol, you go 4 or 5 days, you're not gonna lose your apartment. Like, how misleading is that? And alcohol is deadly. It's a serious, dangerous detox to do it alone. And she had a seizure on the bathroom floor. So it's like, that could be a whole nother topic, but, yeah, this is a multi-layered question, very difficult to answer. Yeah, and I will share the trauma part of it, in like working hands-on, feet on the street. So there's a scene where Janice, where I'm like, oh shoot, look at that. And the guy is beating up the other guy. And Janice says, call it in, like I'm her partner. And I have like multiple arrests with the Worcester Police, right? I'm not her partner. I'm the recovery coach working with her. And, but we had built such a good relationship together, and she's a recovery ally. Her daughter's in recovery. And so when Janice gets out, I go, hurry up, roll up the windows and lock the doors. But I was homeless in that same area for 12 years. And that just shows how strong PTSD is and like how traumatic, where it just brought me back. And like, Lisa was like, can I get out? I'm like, no, this is a bad area. But like, you know, in active addiction, I was homeless out there on the corner with no problem at all, you know? And, but like, you know, mental health is real too. I just wanted to share that part.
And that's one of the things I think that really impressed me about you and spoke to your resiliency is, and Bridget's and Christine's, is that, you know, they don't leave anyone behind. I don't know that if I was homeless somewhere and I found recovery and there were traumatic things happen when you're homeless, like if I could go back there. I mean, you always say what you can't do. You don't know what you're gonna do. But the fact that, you know, they have this like lift the next person up, I was very moved by that. It's very moving to me. And you forget, you know, because sometimes we've gone to screenings and people who are in recovery will kind of crack on you a little bit, like, oh, what's the matter, Becky, you're afraid, you used to be out there, now you're rolling the windows up, but they forget that and then they're just like jazzing her a little bit, but.
Yeah, giving me shit.
Right, but you forget that PTSD is real, and that can, seeing that violence can make you, you know, panic or freeze. I know at school, when I'm a teacher full time, when I teach, if there's a fight, like, I'm not your girl. Like, don't call me. Like, there was a fight at school and I'm like, hello, knocking on people's doors. I'm like, there's something going on in that bathroom, someone's gonna go in there. Like, I can watch it on TV, but in real life, like, I'll just melt down. I just can't watch it. So, you know, to the point where I will like kind of freeze. So, you know, everybody's got different stuff, but the fact that you guys all still work in that is commendable.
I
think one of the memories that's going to stick with me is after you had made a call to the treatment center for Blanca, and she walks across the street, and her kind of last words were, you know, I want this, I want this. Yeah. And I think part of the stigma, one of many facets of stigma, is that people think that people who are suffering don't want something better or don't know what, you know, that somehow they choose the life they live. And in that moment, you know, Blanca was saying, I want help, and you have to get the stars to align, the beds have to open. You know, you saw the number of nights people were looking for a shelter just to stay in, you know, and all those things. So there's a lot of like systemic stuff that we could get into. You know, the role of stigma is so powerful in this story, and Christine, I think, addresses it really bluntly in a lot of pieces of it, as does everyone. So a lot we could unpack here, and just want to make it so that the folks out here can ask some questions. Susie, could you talk to us about the recovery community organizations and their role in supporting folks in Vermont and in other communities?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Daniel. Yes, the recovery centers in the state are fundamentally, they're a safe place where people can go. And I know when I was first in recovery, they told me it was a good idea to change my playgrounds and my playmates. And so if you're really starting your whole life over, how do you do that? You're already so alone. And so to find a community of people, where for me, I first went to 12-step programs, and I instantly felt that sense of belonging that I had never felt. And it was the first time I took a drink, it was like I exhaled for the first time in my life. And when I found recovery, it was like I could just breathe in again. I could take in the world again. I could be open to the world. So recovery centers are safe places to be. They're where people with lived experience with trauma, with addiction, with homelessness, with all the struggles we see people having, that people can say, yeah, I know that experience, and here's what's happened for me. And so, Daniel, you asked, you know, how do we change some of the story that we tell the stories. We tell the stories to each other in recovery groups, in recovery centers, and we hear that, oh, these things really happen, so that when children or when women say, this happened to me, that people will know people that it happened to. They'll know it's true. They'll feel it's true. And then that can just become part of the change. That I grew up in an alcoholic family, and we never ever talked about it. But now my mom's been in Al-Anon for like 40 years, and I've got several nephews who we will talk about it. It's not the big elephant in the room anymore. I've got a nephew who every once in a while when I go home, he'll either say, well, I'm not drinking, but I'm smoking pot, or hey, I've got 30 days or whatever, but it's just out there and we talk about it. So I think that there's something very healing and liberating about the recovery process. And you can find those kinds of connections at recovery centers and recovery residences too. And the thing about recovery centers is we know what our role is. And so if we're supporting somebody and we see that they've got a really complicated traumatic past, or they've got child custody issues or other legal issues, the recovery centers and residences partner very closely with the other providers and agencies in the community, because we're the only ones in town who do this recovery piece, and yet we want to have close relationships with our detox and provider partners, treatment providers, and with the homeless agencies, and we want to help. We want to be as connected as we could possibly be with all the other partners in the community who can help lift people up when they come to us for support. We can do the recovery piece, we can share our experience, and we can reach out to, we partner with police departments, with probation and parole departments, emergency departments, we have parenting programs, we have artistic expression programs. We're connected with our mental health agencies because, again, we know like our lane, and we know that we can't provide everything to people who come to the centers, but we can make introductions to people who can.
All right, so last question for me, and it's for you, Caitlin. So you're one of the leaders that's kind of helping to knit this fabric together, build this community here in Windsor area, and what sort of gives you hope, and what is your dream for this community, and what role does sort of this community for us means many circles. It means our family, it means our friends, it means our recovery community, and then it also means our physical area where we live, So what does community really mean to you, and what are you hoping that your team will be able to build here in Windsor?
I'm hoping that we can all come together to, find a location and work together to get funding to support people in recovery or who want to enter recovery. That's my goal for the community, and to have more support and programs, meetings, activities for parents in recovery.
Well, again, just thank you for paying it forward, for sharing your experience, strength, and hope, for telling this story, Lisa, for being here, 13 months in and over 60 showings. It doesn't seem like this is gonna stop anytime soon, so we'll keep you scrambling around the state here. But I want to make sure that you all get a chance to weigh in here with the last few minutes that we have. So there is a mic right up there if any of you have any questions.
Where I see a lot of stigma and misunderstanding is around this harm reduction. There's this idea that providing naloxone, providing harm reduction is actually promoting drug use, or it's a crutch for somebody, and it's going to deter them from getting into recovery, or you're keeping them hooked on drugs. But we see how important it was to sort of help people through overdoses to get to the point where they could be in recovery, because relapse is common, right? Or multiple overdoses can happen. So could you kind of speak a little bit to that, and how you sort of address that misinformation or misunderstanding about harm reduction?
Yeah, you want to?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I would say that it's part of, like a recovery center, at recovery centers, recovery coaches and peer support workers help the individual, and then our role as leaders in recovery centers is part of that connection with the other community partners. And I was the director at the Brattleboro Center for a number of years, and when we started an intentional partnership with the police. The first time the chief ever came to the center, he came up to my office and he said, "Susie, I think I scared everybody," because he was in the building and he was in a uniform, right? And I said, "I want you all to be here so much that people don't think twice about it, because you're not here to nab somebody and arrest somebody. You're here because you're a partner." And so through our role as recovery centers, we did education and outreach with the police department, who had plenty of skeptics. But the more we talked about recovery, our approach to recovery, we did a motivational interviewing training for the police staff. And all of a sudden, one of the sergeants said, "Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. This is how we de-escalate domestic violence situations. And so they could see parallels in the nature of our work. And so we could, once we had those openings, we could talk about, you know, the initial resistance to things like Narcan. And, you know, now we ended up with a community policing program where coaches and officers went out together to do outreach, to connect with people in the community, and the police as well met people where they were, did not try to impose anything, simply tried to be a support, to learn. And sometimes the coaches would say, y'all can stay in the cruiser, we got this one. And they just developed the rapport where they could kind of honor the boundaries of our different roles. And I think that relates to the question.
Forgive me for like also weighing in on this, and I'll just share my experience and my sort of thoughts on this. I mean, my first thought, honestly, is I wish that every person who believed that could meet Rebecca or other people who are doing incredible things in their life. I feel like the people who have survived and have gone on to change lives and to have a butterfly effect in the world, that those people who believe that could just meet a person like Rebecca or, you know, others who have had experiences where, for the grace of God, you know, just like could have not been here, you know, and we're that close. But I'll tell you about I used to be the director of an organization called Jenna's Promise, and we had the first Narcan vending machine in northern New England, and so we put it in with a grant from University of Vermont Center on Rural Addiction, and we had the system built, and it got shipped out from Indiana, and we put it out there outside our health center, and the very next day somebody overdosed at the laundromat, and so like within a day it had an effect in changing the course of somebody's life. And we actually did it partly based on the fact that a 17-year-old in a trailer park down the road died after you know, having a fentanyl-laced Percocet 30 pill. And we just couldn't live with the fact that, you know, a mile away from other recovery resources, somebody could be without what they needed to survive, because sometimes they don't have time, they don't have people that are willing to help them, the people that they're with, even if they're with people, don't know that the Good Samaritan law protects people from you know, prosecution if they report that somebody has overdosed around them or with them. And so a lot of factors can you know, make the difference. But I remember we got what I would politely characterize as hate mail, some letters from the community saying you're bringing in the bad element, you know, we're going to have X, Y, or Z type of person hanging around because of your Narcan vending machine and other things that you're building, you know, you're ruining our town. And we actually held a community meeting and kind of worked our way through that. And I remember actually the lieutenant governor was in the room, and somebody said, you know, to the lieutenant governor, not knowing where the money was coming from, oh, you guys are, you know, you won't help with X, Y, or Z medication, but you'll help pay for Narcan for people. And he didn't say anything, but one of the people that we had served who was saved by Narcan stood up and said, if it weren't for that Narcan, I wouldn't be here today. And this was like kind of a prominent person in the community, and I think it stunned everybody in the room. And I guess my final message on this front that I would say is that as much as the media and other things tell us the worst of the world around us, that there is so much more hope and so many more examples of the amazing power of recovery than there is anything else. You know, there are 23.5 million people in recovery in America. There are about 18,000 people on opioid on medications like naltrexone and Subutex and other medication-assisted treatment. There are over 40,000 people in recovery in a state of about 600,000. About 1 in 7 Americans is in recovery, which is to say that so often all around us in our communities, there are people in recovery living their lives quietly and productively and beautifully, raising families, doing amazing things, paying it forward. And so I just, if this doesn't have to do just with Narcan, but with anything, where there's life, there is hope. People who get to live, they go on to do amazing things and bring people with them and have a butterfly effect in the world. And if instead we asking what it costs to save somebody, we asked what is the butterfly effect in the world of their having been alive, I think that's a much more powerful question. So just my thoughts. But any additional sort of thoughts on that?
I always say, I don't think I need it. Kind of loud. Like harm reduction, reducing harm, pretty simple. And we're just trying to keep someone alive today so they have another chance.
It's very simple, right? Like keeping someone alive, right? You
Yeah.
do it for any other disease, right?
Like your cancer analogy.
Yes. My cancer analogy is like if you go to the doctor, and I always say God forbid because I don't want anyone to obviously get sick. Oh, I'm sorry. I can.
Sorry. Yep.
So if you go to the doctor and God forbid you have cancer, your doctor doesn't say like, well, you can't have chemo, or you can only have radiation and that's it. Like you have choices, right? You could have surgery, you could do nothing, you could have radiation or chemo. So it wouldn't be, that would be, reducing harm, but also that falls into the medically assisted treatment stuff too. There's options of things to do. So it's just keeping people healthy. And does it matter how many times somebody's had to have been Narcan? Like, there's a lot of stigma around that, right? And there's stigma around medically assisted treatment, but is there stigma around if, like, I don't know, you get skin cancer and your dermatologist is like, please use sunblock, and then you go back and something pops up again? Is he gonna be like, I'm not treating you, I told you to use the sunblock? Like, that's not gonna happen, right? I mean, so it's just not that complicated. Sometimes we stick around, sometimes people don't like to ask questions in front of other people, so we kind of hang out for a little bit. If anybody has a more personal question. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Oh, thank you for having us.